What would you do if the person who healed your heart after betrayal was the one person you could never imagine falling for? Megan Davis and I, David Marshall, tied the knot right after finishing college. Our love story had spanned 3 years, though I was 3 years older than Megan because I had spent 2 years volunteering with the Peace Corps before starting my degree. Both our families were thrilled about the union, but none more so than Megan's mother, Karen. She seemed to live for the excitement of our engagement, the detailed wedding planning, and the grand ceremony itself, things she had never experienced in her own life. Karen had faced her share of hardships. She became pregnant as a teenager, which led her devoutly religious parents to disown her. Struggling to make ends meet, she married Tom Davis at 21, a much older man who could provide the financial stability she needed to raise Megan. Tom was a reliable, kind-hearted man, but he wasn't exactly brimming with charisma or romance. Their wedding was modest, at his insistence, and Karen missed out on the traditional joys of a whirlwind romance, a full engagement, or a lavish wedding. Despite her struggles, Karen always maintained a kind spirit, and I admired her greatly. She was only 11 years older than me, so I never saw her as a typical mother-in-law. To me, she felt more like a young aunt. Karen bore a striking resemblance to Megan, though she was 3 inches shorter and had vibrant green eyes instead of Megan's blue. Her beauty was understated, she often dressed conservatively and carried herself with quiet shyness, likely shaped by her early experiences. Yet her radiant smile and warm nature could light up a room. For years into my marriage to Megan, Tom passed away suddenly from a heart attack. While his unhealthy lifestyle made his death less surprising, it hit Karen hard. I stepped in to handle all of Tom's estate matters, supported her through the grieving process, and kept her closely involved in our lives. I encouraged her to stay active with her charity work and tried to fill her days with purpose. However, there was one area she refused to even consider: dating. Despite knowing several men, some younger, who were genuinely interested in her, Karen showed no desire to move on romantically. But life has a way of throwing unexpected curveballs. Not long after celebrating our 6th wedding anniversary, I found myself grappling with a situation I never imagined facing, being an oblivious husband caught in the crosshairs of betrayal. Naive as I might have been about certain things, when it came time to act, I didn't hesitate. Once I confirmed Megan's infidelity, I packed my things and moved out of our apartment. I found temporary refuge at an extended-stay motel and immediately began untangling our finances. Despite everything, I believed Megan genuinely loved me. She had simply lost her way and failed to see her brief, emotionless affair as the betrayal it truly was. When I confronted her, she accused me of overreacting, unable, or unwilling, to grasp the depth of the wound she'd inflicted. I knew Megan had turned to her mother, Karen, for support. Though I'd never called her Mom, just Karen, I respected her greatly and understood why Megan would seek her out. Still, I wasn't sure how Karen might respond to my actions. 3 days after I left, Karen showed up at my motel unannounced. Her visit caught me off guard, but her warmth and our history made it impossible to turn her away. I invited her in, and we sat together on the small sofa in my room. She reached for my hand, her green eyes clouded with emotion. "I'm so sorry, David," she said softly. "I never raised Megan to behave this way." I gave her hand a reassuring squeeze and replied, "I know, Karen. You've always been a person of strong values. What Megan did isn't a reflection of you or the challenges you faced. How are you holding up?" A single tear glistened in her eye as she answered. "I'm managing, but this has been hard on all of us." "I'm fine," I said, though my voice betrayed a hint of the pain I was suppressing. "It was a shock, but I'm decisive. I've dealt with it by leaving. I'll probably hurt for a while, but I'll get through it." She hesitated before asking, "Do you think there's any chance you could forgive Megan and take her back? She doesn't seem to understand how serious this is, and I don't know how to help her see it." Her question made my chest tighten. A tear escaped my eye as I admitted, I don't know. I can't even begin to think about forgiveness when she doesn't acknowledge the damage she's done. We spent the next hour talking, not just about Megan, but about life, memories, and how much things had changed. When Karen finally stood to leave, she wrapped me in a hug that lasted a beat longer than felt appropriate. As she pulled back, she looked me in the eye with a sincerity that startled me. "I hope your divorce from Megan doesn't mean you're divorcing me too," she said. "Karen, there will always be a place in my heart for you," I replied earnestly. Her visit left me feeling strangely comforted. By advocating for Megan while still validating my feelings, Karen walked a delicate line with grace. She didn't pressure me to make any decisions, nor did she dismiss my pain. Instead, she acted as more of a friend than a mother-in-law. But that night, my sense of peace unraveled. I woke up in a cold sweat, haunted by a dream that was as vivid as it was inappropriate, a dream involving Karen. It left me shaken and questioning myself in ways I hadn't expected. A week after moving out, I filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. At the same time, I informed my landlord that I would no longer be responsible for the rent on the apartment Megan and I had shared. Megan was visibly upset by my actions, but I struggled to understand her distress. What had she expected? We had been together for 9 years, and I had always been straightforward about who I was and what I stood for. Despite her upset, Megan and her lawyer tried various tactics to prolong the process, including pushing for counseling. Those first 3 months were grueling as I grappled with the shock of what had happened, but I remained steadfast in my principles. The support of 2 of my close single friends helped immensely. They encouraged me to focus on rebuilding my life. Karen also became a source of unexpected solace. She called me weekly, not only to check on me but to share uplifting stories from her charity work. Once a month, we would meet for lunch, and Karen was always in high spirits, her positivity acting as a balm during those turbulent times. About 3 months into this routine, we had our first preliminary hearing before the magistrate. It was a Monday afternoon, and Megan's lawyer pushed once again for counseling. However, my attorney successfully countered by presenting photos of Megan meeting George, her affair partner, for lunch on at least 2 occasions since the divorce was filed. Despite Megan's tearful insistence that there had been no further physical contact with George, her lack of emotional distance from him undermined her credibility. The judge denied the request for involuntary counseling, signaling to everyone present that the marriage was on its final legs. The legal process seemed poised to conclude in another 3 months. The very next day, Karen called me at work. While her calls were usually comforting, they were rarely made during my working hours, so this one caught me off guard. After some brief small talk, she got straight to the point. "David, I'm sure you've heard from Megan. She called me yesterday, quite upset. It looks like the divorce might be finalized soon. Is that true?" "Yes, Karen," I replied with a sigh. "It's true. I'm deeply saddened by it, but I have to move forward. My lawyer believes we'll sort out the financial matters quickly, and a final decision should come in about 3 months. I figured you might be feeling down," Karen said gently. "So, I'd like to invite you to dinner on Friday. It wouldn't be too awkward for you to go out with your soon-to-be ex-mother-in-law, would it? If you're uncomfortable, I can always wear a disguise." Her tone had a playful lilt, the hint of humor breaking through the tension. I couldn't help but laugh. "That sounds nice, Karen, and no, there's no need for a disguise. I just hope I won't be terrible company." "Don't worry about that," she said reassuringly. "I'll make sure you enjoy yourself, and eat well. I know cooking isn't your strong suit, after all." I chuckled again, feeling a bit lighter for the first time that day. "All right, what time should I be ready on Friday?" "Leave that to me," she said confidently. "I'll pick you up. Just bring your appetite." Her comment about my cooking skills felt more like a backhanded compliment than a jab, but it brought a much-needed smile to my face. For the first time in weeks, I found myself looking forward to something other than closure. "I can either meet you at the restaurant or you can pick me up," I offered, wanting to leave the logistics up to Karen. "No way. I'm treating you, and there's no room for arguments," she replied firmly. "I'll pick you up. Let's say around 7 p.m. I agreed, though I couldn't help but feel a twinge of unease. Tuesday night brought another one of those unsettling dreams that left me questioning my own mind. If these kept up, I thought grimly, I might need to see a psychiatrist. When Karen arrived at my apartment on Friday evening, I wasn't prepared for what I saw. It was 7:02 p.m., and she knocked on my door with a nervous smile. But what truly caught me off guard was how she looked. She was dressed far more stylishly than I had ever seen her before. Her chic, low-cut blouse paired with a short skirt and strappy heels showcased her figure in a way I'd never noticed. She wore light makeup that highlighted her striking green eyes and had styled her hair in a way that made her already lovely face radiant. At that moment, Karen appeared more like someone in her 30s than a woman of 43. She seemed nervous as she stood there, her smile faltering for just a second. "Wow, Karen, you look amazing," I stammered, struggling to find my words. Her relief was visible as she said, "Thank you. The restaurant is quite upscale, and I didn't want to look out of place." "Is this a new outfit?" I asked, still in awe. "Yes," she admitted, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. "I bought this, and a few other things, this week. I thought it was time to update my wardrobe." As we drove to the restaurant, Karen chatted about her week, filling the car with her vibrant energy. But my focus wavered when I noticed her skirt had ridden up slightly as she drove, revealing more of her legs than I'd ever seen before. I quickly looked away, feeling a mix of embarrassment and guilt. Karen had chosen a restaurant that was not only upscale but also had a dance floor, a detail she casually mentioned during dinner. The meal itself was delightful, and Karen's infectious mood lightened the weight I'd been carrying from the ongoing divorce. However, her drinking habits caught my attention. Normally, Karen would have a single glass of wine at most. Tonight, though, she ordered a bottle for the two of us. I only had one glass, as I rarely drink, but Karen finished the rest on her own. Her confidence seemed to grow with each sip. After dinner, she suggested we try the dance floor. "Come on," she urged, her eyes sparkling. "It'll be fun." I hesitated at first, but her enthusiasm was hard to resist. The only times I'd danced with Karen before were at Megan's wedding and a few months after Tom's passing. Back then, she had politely turned down multiple dance offers from others. Tonight, though, was a different story. As we danced, Karen seemed completely at ease, her laughter cutting through the ambient music. Then, a moment of awkwardness struck. A man approached us and asked if he could dance with Karen. I was startled, and for a split second, I realized something uncomfortable. Karen's youthful appearance, paired with her striking outfit, might easily make someone mistake her for my date. I quickly composed myself and replied to the man with a smile, "That depends on my mother-in-law." His face turned beet red with embarrassment, while Karen laughed and playfully swatted my arm. "He's just joking," she said warmly, before adding with a sly grin, "but since this is only our second date, I wouldn't want to disappoint him, especially if some young woman steals him away. So, thank you for the offer, but I'll have to pass." The man nodded awkwardly and walked away, and Karen's laughter lingered in the air. She glanced at me with a teasing glint in her eye as if to gauge my reaction. I simply finished the last of my soda, and we returned to the dance floor for a few more songs. After about 5 or 6 dances, Karen leaned in close, her breath warm against my ear. "I think I've hit my limit," she admitted softly. "Both with the alcohol and the dancing. Can you take me home? I probably shouldn't drive. I'm not sure if I'm drunk since I've never been drunk before, but I don't think I'd make it home without hitting something." I nodded and retrieved her car from the valet while she made a quick trip to the powder room. When she returned, she seemed more composed, though her playful smile still lingered. We drove in silence for most of the way, Karen resting her head against the window, her earlier vibrancy now subdued. Karen lived in a charming, stylish house that she'd decorated with great care. When we arrived, I helped her to the door. She fumbled with her purse, pulling out her keys before giving me a sheepish smile. "Wait here," she said as she slipped inside. A moment later, she returned with a mischievous look on her face. "I thought I'd leave you a little souvenir." Before I could react, she handed me a small bundle of fabric. It took me a second to realize they were her panties. I felt my face flush, but that was nothing compared to what came next. Karen stepped back into the doorway, dropped her skirt, and unbuttoned her blouse, revealing her bra. My jaw must have dropped as I stood there, dumbfounded. "What are you doing?" I stammered, my mind reeling. Karen smiled shyly but confidently. "I've always hidden behind those old-fashioned clothes, David. But tonight, I wanted you to see me, not just as Megan's mother, but as me." I tried to collect my thoughts, but my words failed me. She stepped closer, her vulnerability disarming. "Please," she pleaded softly. "Stay the night. I've never woken up next to someone I love before." Her use of the word love struck me like a bolt of lightning. Love? My mind was spinning, but I couldn't bring myself to leave. Her eyes held a sincerity that cut through my confusion. Without another word, she rested her head on my shoulder, and we sat in silence. Exhausted, I fell into a deep sleep almost immediately. That night, my dreams were vivid and intimate, more vivid than any I could recall. Each one felt startlingly real, and when I woke the next morning, I was emotionally and physically drained. Karen stirred beside me, her green eyes soft as they met mine. "How about we take a shower together?" she whispered, a teasing smile playing on her lips. Followed by a quick kiss. I tried to laugh it off, replying, "Sounds tempting." But as I moved to get out of bed, she grabbed my hand, tears suddenly filling her eyes. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice breaking. "I told you I love you. I know this was our first time together, but I meant it." Her vulnerability stunned me. I didn't know how to respond. My thoughts swirled as I tried to make sense of everything that had happened. Whatever this was, it had gone far beyond anything I had ever anticipated. It became clear that Karen was experiencing a kind of joy and freedom she hadn't felt in years. When she suggested we share a shower, I got the sense it was her first time experiencing something so intimate with a man, and her excitement was palpable. Afterward, Karen, now wrapped in a short robe, was in the kitchen preparing breakfast. She moved about with a radiant smile, humming softly to herself. It was impossible not to notice how beautiful and light-hearted she seemed, and her happiness was infectious. We sat down to a lovely breakfast, and Karen was as charming as I'd ever seen her. Her newfound openness had me captivated. At one point, she placed her hands gently on my chest and sighed deeply. Looking into my eyes with a mix of vulnerability and confidence, she said softly, "David, would you please make love to me again? This time, in your bed." The sweetness of her tone, the intimacy we'd shared earlier, and the raw chemistry between us left me powerless to resist. This time, everything about her felt even more intoxicating. Karen's soft moans and whispers filled the small space as we stumbled back to the bed, holding each other close. It was passionate and overwhelming, a connection I hadn't felt in years, if ever. Later that day, Karen suggested we spend more time together. "Why don't you come over for dinner tomorrow night?" she asked. "We can watch a movie on my big screen TV." "That sounds appealing," I replied with a chuckle. "When should I come by?" "How about 5:30, she said. "You can help me chop vegetables while I attempt to cook a terrible roast." After she left, I sat in silence, reflecting on everything that had happened. What the hell am I doing? I asked myself. This was my mother-in-law, for God's sake. I couldn't stop thinking about the consequences if Megan ever found out. Beyond that, there was Karen's emotional investment to consider. She might already be falling for me. Did I really want to hurt her, even unintentionally? And yet, Karen wasn't just any woman, she was the kindest, most genuine person I'd ever been with. Over the next week, we grew even closer. Karen invited me to her office on more than one occasion, where we shared stolen moments of intimacy. One night, we ended up in her bed again, losing ourselves in each other. By Saturday, we decided to mix things up and went to her health club for a workout session. On Sunday, we spent the morning hiking through a nearby wilderness trail, where we made love in the woods, tucked away in the back seat of my car, unconcerned with how sweaty or disheveled we were. That evening, we shared yet another intimate moment in her bed, our connection growing deeper with every encounter. By Monday morning, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. But that peace was shattered when Karen decided to bare her soul. "I've loved you since the first time we met," she confessed, her voice trembling. "You're the only man I've ever truly loved." Her words stunned me, but she didn't stop there. She explained why a long-term relationship between us was impossible, the 11-year age gap, the inevitable damage it would cause to her relationship with Megan, her inability to give me the children I might want, and her fear that I could never love her as deeply as she loved me. Despite all of this, Karen concluded with quiet determination, "I'll accept whatever you can give me, David. I'll always be here for you." Her vulnerability shook me to my core. I didn't know what to say, and the weight of her love and sacrifice left me grappling with emotions I hadn't yet processed. This was uncharted territory, and I couldn't ignore the storm that lay ahead. I closed the door behind Karen, but my mind was anything but settled. Over the next 2 weeks, whenever I wasn't completely absorbed in work or some other activity, my thoughts would drift back to her, to Karen, to Megan, to the tangle of emotions and anxiety that seemed to follow me everywhere. My nights were no reprieve either. Nearly every evening, I found myself dreaming of Karen. In my dreams, we made love, traveled to exotic places, cuddled on lazy afternoons, and in one particularly unsettling dream, even had a dozen children together. Despite the turmoil in my mind, I couldn't resist staying connected. I called Karen every day, even if it was just for a few minutes of casual conversation. She never pressured me, never pushed for anything more than the connection we already shared. Still, the weight of our unconventional relationship, the 11-year age gap and the fact that she was still technically my mother-in-law, kept me from making any definitive decisions. My usual decisiveness, a trait I prided myself on, seemed to desert me. When the divorce was finalized, I worried about how this would affect Karen and me. Yet, to my relief, our relationship weathered the storm. Shortly after, Karen took Megan on a week-long cruise to help her process everything. When Karen returned, she told me the trip had worked wonders for Megan. "She seems to have let go of most of her anger toward you," Karen shared. "I think she finally understands that the fault lies with her own actions." "Did she ask about your love life?" I couldn't resist asking, though I knew it was a delicate topic. Karen gave me a knowing smile but didn't answer directly. Deep down, I knew the truth. Despite my over 5-year marriage to Megan, I couldn't ignore the reality that my bond with Karen was far deeper, far more fulfilling. Karen's inexperience on our first night together had given way to an intimacy that was not only skilled but also expressive, adventurous, and deeply loving. I felt a connection with her that I'd never experienced before. But then, everything changed with one phone call. It was early Friday afternoon, and I was in the middle of a meeting when Karen called my office. Her voice was trembling, almost incoherent as she begged me to come to her house. We had plans that evening to attend a play and, as had become our routine, to spend intimate time together afterward. Hearing her so distraught set off alarm bells in my head, and I left work immediately to be with her. When I arrived, Karen was sitting on the couch, her face pale and streaked with tears. I sat beside her, taking her hands in mine, and gently said, "Karen, stop. Look at me. Tell me what's on your mind." She sniffled, took a deep, shaky breath, and finally spoke the words that would change everything. "David. I'm 7 weeks pregnant." Her confession left me stunned. For a moment, I couldn't speak. This was completely unexpected. Karen and I had discussed the possibility of children before, but she had expressed regret that it wasn't something she thought she could give me. She had tried to have a child with Tom years ago, but it hadn't worked out. The idea of her being pregnant now was nothing short of miraculous, and overwhelming. We sat together in silence, the weight of her words settling between us. I squeezed her hands again and met her gaze. She looked vulnerable yet hopeful, as if unsure how I would react. My thoughts were a whirlwind, joy, fear, confusion, all colliding at once. But one thing was clear, our lives would never be the same. I've always prided myself on being quick to make decisions, but that weekend left my thoughts in complete disarray. I told Karen I needed time to process everything. She smiled through her tears, gave me a quick kiss on the lips, and with a playful nudge, sent me out the door. Despite her light-hearted goodbye, my mind was anything but calm. My nights were restless, haunted by vivid dreams of Karen. In these dreams, we were making love, traveling to exotic destinations, cuddling by firelight, and, in one unsettling vision, raising a dozen children together. During the days, I called Karen regularly, just to hear her voice. She never pressured me or demanded answers. Yet, the 11-year age gap and the fact that she was still my mother-in-law weighed heavily on my mind, making it nearly impossible to reach a decision. Our relationship endured the turbulence of the final divorce proceedings. Afterward, Karen took Megan on a week-long cruise. When she returned, Karen shared how much the trip had helped Megan. "She's calmer now," Karen said, her voice tinged with relief. "Her anger toward you has faded, and she seems to understand that her own actions caused this." "Did she ask about your love life?" I inquired cautiously. Karen hesitated before nodding. "Yes," she said simply, leaving the rest unspoken. Even as I navigated my doubts, one thing was clear, my bond with Karen was far deeper than anything I'd experienced before. While she had been sexually inexperienced that first night, she quickly blossomed into an expressive, loving, adventurous partner. Her energy and affection transformed what could have been a fleeting connection into something profound. The true turning point came one Friday afternoon. Karen called me at work, her voice thick with tears. "David, can you come over? Please. I need you." I dropped everything and arrived at her house a little after 3 p.m. Karen was visibly shaken, her face pale and streaked with tears. I guided her to the couch, held her hands, and looked her straight in the eyes. "Karen, stop," I said gently but firmly. "Tell me what's going on." She sniffled, took a deep breath, and finally blurted out, "I'm 7 weeks pregnant." Her words hit me like a thunderclap. For a moment, I couldn't speak. This was entirely unexpected. We had talked about children before, and Karen had expressed regret, convinced it wasn't possible for her to conceive. She had tried to have another child with Tom, but it hadn't worked. A doctor had even told her, after Megan's birth, that complications might make future pregnancies unlikely. And yet, here we were. Karen began crying again, overwhelmed by the situation. I gently cupped her face in my hands, wiped away her tears with my thumbs, and said, "Stop crying, Karen. I need to ask you something." She looked at me with wide, tearful eyes. I repeated myself until she finally calmed down enough to listen. "Will you make me the happiest man in the world and marry me?" I asked, my voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside me. It took a moment for my words to register. When she realized I was serious, her expression shifted from shock to joy. "Yes," she exclaimed, her tears giving way to radiant happiness. We embraced tightly, the gravity of the moment settling in as our hearts seemed to align. "I love you, Karen," I said earnestly. "More than I ever thought possible." And I've been the happiest woman in the world these past 6 months, she replied, her voice trembling with emotion. And now, I'm even happier. The moment was nearly perfect, until Megan unexpectedly walked in. At first, she seemed confused, laughing as if she thought it was some kind of joke. But as her eyes darted between Karen and me, the seriousness of our embrace and expressions made her smile fade. Her face went blank, her eyes glazing over as the reality of what she was seeing began to sink in. I rushed to Megan as she began to collapse, catching her just before she hit the floor. Gently, I carried her to the sofa Karen had just vacated, laying her down as carefully as I could. Karen sprang into action immediately, fetching smelling salts and a cold compress from the bathroom. Before she used them, she turned to me with a calm but determined expression. "I think it would be best if you left before she wakes up," Karen said softly, but there was an unmistakable firmness in her tone. Then, with a hopeful smile, she added, "Can we go ring shopping soon?" Her suggestion caught me off guard, but I couldn't argue. "We'll go as soon as we can, hopefully Monday," I promised. Karen chuckled warmly before heading back to tend to Megan. "Monday it is, then," she said with a sparkle in her eye. I left the house with a mix of emotions, unsure of everything Karen and Megan might discuss once Megan woke up. But I knew one thing for certain: Karen loved Megan as deeply as any mother could love her child, despite Megan's past mistakes and her role in the collapse of our marriage. Karen reassured me that, while things might remain complicated, her bond with Megan would endure. Although Megan and I had no plans to maintain a close relationship, I made it clear that I bore her no ill will. I promised to always treat her with respect, acknowledging that I hadn't intended to hurt her but couldn't help falling in love with Karen. Megan accepted this with more grace than I had expected, likely due to Karen's influence. One unexpected challenge, or perhaps blessing, we faced was Karen's heightened libido during her pregnancy. She joked more than once that she needed to make up for 2 decades of unsatisfying intimacy. Who was I to object? Our physical connection flourished, and we maintained a vigorous love life throughout her pregnancy. In the meantime, I resolved to close some lingering chapters from my past. I hired a private investigator to monitor George, Megan's former affair partner. After discovering that George was engaged, I sent his fiancée a detailed dossier outlining his relationship with Megan and how it had devastated my marriage. Within a week, I learned that George's fiancée had left him. Shortly thereafter, he relocated to another city. The satisfaction of seeing justice served gave me a sense of closure I hadn't realized I needed. When our daughter Emma was born, Karen and I felt a profound sense of joy. The experience of building a family together only deepened our bond. After Emma's arrival, Karen and I decided we wanted another child. This time, we chose to pursue egg retrieval and surrogacy, as Karen's age made another pregnancy a risk we weren't willing to take. We're now expecting a baby girl next month. As I look ahead, I sometimes wonder what kind of relationship Megan's daughter might have with our children. But I've stopped trying to predict the complexities of family dynamics. What I do know is that Karen has an endless capacity for love, and she will embrace her granddaughter with the same warmth and devotion she shows to all of her family.